I have to have a little slides to show. And I looked, I guess what got my interest in this topic was I was listening to podcasts as I often do. And a woman was on there talking, actually one of the speakers, and she was saying that she had, with COVID, she was trapped in her house all the time and really got kind of a negative attitude and bummed out. And then she found that if she would each day try to find something that created a feeling of awe in her life, that it made a huge difference. And a lot of it involved, as some of you have already said, going out in nature and just being observant. And so her goal became to find something each day that creates a sense of awe. Well, that made me want to go look at what's out there about awe experiences. And there's this paper published by these two psychologists that seems to be one that many people focus on as to what is awe as they define it anyway. And so it's had two components of perceived vastness, something larger than yourself, or at least something out of your ordinary level of experience. And then after that, the need for accommodation. So the way the emotion of awe forces us to change our understanding of the world. It's seeing something beyond ourselves and then re-looking at the world in a different way. And so it's been described then as self-transcendent, shifts our attention away from ourselves, makes us feel like a part of something greater than ourselves, can even change our perception of time and make us more generous towards others. I think that there's some discussion there in the literature about, on the one hand, when you see these dramatic episodes of or experience of awe, it makes you feel small, but rather than make you feel insignificant, it makes you feel more connected to something much bigger than yourself. And for some of us, that might be God. For some of it, it might just be the world. So you would define it differently, but somehow it forces you to be connected to something bigger than yourself. Now, the awe experiences can be infrequent or regular, and the argument would be we ought to try to find ways to have regular awe experiences. And after I've done this, I've tried to do that, although there are days when you get swamped with stuff, all of a sudden you realize the day has passed and you didn't find a way to seek out an experience of awe. Most of the time when you hear about these, they're positive experiences, the mountaintop things and so on, but they can be negative. And back in history of awe, back in the, looking back in early civilization, a lot of the awe experience was the power of God that was almost negative, bringing plagues, there was the awe of the power of God that wasn't always a positive thing. But today it's viewed more in the sense of being positive. And then it can be large or small. It can be the mountaintop experiences. It can be those what I refer to, or others refer to, as thin places, where you have an experience where you feel like the holy is right there next to you, that there's this powerful experience. These don't happen, at least for me, very often, but when they do, it's amazing feeling of awe. But then it can be small things that just catch your eye, that you observe, that makes you feel a sense of wonder, amazement, maybe even something you normally just ignore, but all of a sudden you focus on it. Probably the smallest thing would maybe be an aha experience, but I don't think that quite fits. That's just where you understand something that you didn't understand before. It's kind of like a small version, I guess, of an awe experience. So what I want to do is show a few visual things for me of awe, and then I would like to hear what others have. And I will say that what I'm showing is mostly visual, but I think many of the awe experiences are not visual. And you share with me some of the ways that you felt that sense of awe in both visually and in other ways. This is not a picture I took. This is one that I was also listening to NPR this week, and the woman was saying that she grew up in New Hampshire, where they would go out in the night sky. They could see the Milky Way. This looks like Arizona or somewhere else, but she said it was just amazing. The sky was so clear. And she even used the word, I just felt a sense of awe when I saw that sky. And then she said, I moved to Pittsburgh, in a city, and I could barely, I could see the moon and maybe Venus or something, but I couldn't see the Milky Way. I couldn't hardly see anything. So she went on she's been on a quest to decrease light pollution in her city, directing lights down, using different wavelengths, things so you could actually get an appreciation of the sky again. So that would be like one of those feelings of awe. Certainly, we've all seen this picture. We just, of course, had the people go up and go around the Earth a few times here recently, and it's like I can't imagine what it'd be like to be up in space looking down on Earth. So again, this isn't my picture because I haven't been up in space, but I did take a picture at my house of the moon. I have a camera that I could do this with, and it just looking at something like that, something distant, made me a feeling of awe and it's a small time compared to billions of stars out there. But I'm sort of working my way down in size on feeling of awe. This is Iguazu Falls in Brazil. It's just not all of them. There's probably at least that many more that you can't get in the picture. And this is one where Liz and I were there walking towards these falls. And when I turned around, Liz was crying. And I said, what's wrong? And she just said, it's just too beautiful. And there's that sense of awe in nature at times that's just too beautiful to hardly explain. This is one where it's the sky. We were out in Colorado with my brothers and their spouses and Liz, and we were out to watch elk come down out of the mountains in the evening, and all of a sudden we looked at the sky, and I mean, we were all giddy about it. It was just amazing kind of impression that you don't normally see. And then I often have these experiences with when I fish over in the Swanee. So this is one of the creeks I fish in. I could sort of imagine sort of the power of God somehow here, but so often it's calm and quiet, and it's always an amazing experience. But sometimes, and this is when I took this a couple of months ago, I got trapped out there trying to get back in when the storm came in. You can see it's already pouring. Well, I experienced this in one of those downpours where you were instantaneously soaked, and I had to pour water out of my shoes and stuff. But I felt this sense of awe that it was amazing, the things I can't control, bigger than me. And somehow I felt this connection way beyond myself. And I didn't mind the experience so much because I felt like I'm just experiencing life in some way. I'm not just in a bubble somewhere inside a house. And so I think you can get those same experiences when it's not necessarily all rosy. This is a picture from the Jewish cemetery in Prague. And it was one of those places where, the history that goes behind it. And as you look at this and you think they were persecuted, and these are all the Jewish people that were buried in this one cemetery, they weren't allowed to be buried elsewhere. And it was just, it takes you back in time, and it creates some sort of connection beyond yourself that made me feel a sense of awe. This is one now has more feeling to it than just a picture, but this is my three brothers and I throwing my mom's ashes into the Gunnison River where she wanted her ashes spread. And now it's not so much a picture, but the experience of awe. To put your hands in your mother's ashes and then to throw those is just and we did the same later, 10 years later with my dad, but it's just an amazing sort of experience of awe that happens. And then other kinds of things. This is actually dinosaur footprints in Moab, Utah. And these are 115 million years old. And when you look at something like this, it's like, wow, you just, on the one hand, you think, I'm just one small speck, in the history of life on Earth. On the other hand, you feel a connection somehow that these were made when it was muddy and they've turned to rock at this point. And so there's that sort of breadth of connection that you can experience. And then this was a little baby barred owl that was not this spring, but last spring during COVID, where, you're trapped in the house, and you go in the neighborhood, and it's just like, wow, life goes on. You're connected to something bigger than yourself. It's just one of those experiences. And then since I agreed to do this seminar, one of the thought processes was looking at just the intricacies of a spider web. And so I was actually out on a walk and saw this banana spider in a web, and you just start looking at all the intricacies and the web and how it makes it, and it's just awe-inspiring. In fact, I turned around and took a picture the other way, and it even looked more interesting to me because I had the clouds sort of in the background of the spider. Now, this part, you're probably not going to appreciate. Only probably a scientist or somebody involved in a medical field appreciates this, but I'm going down now in smaller things that create awe in me. And my training is a veterinary hematologist. And this is actually a bone marrow from a dog with a multiple myeloma. It's a bone marrow tumor. This particular one, when we stained it, had this amazing red coloration. These are called flaming plasma cells. And it just created a sense of awe when this happens at various times in a pathologic specimen. Somehow I go, wow. I mean, it just created that feeling in me. I also studied in research this is scanning electron micrographs. So we're going even smaller. These are red blood cells with this external parasite attached to them. And, when you see these on the microscope and then you see them on scanning EM, and it just kind of blows your mind that you can see things that small. And then lastly, this is even more obscure, I think, for anybody but me. And I've been writing a book chapter on iron metabolism and drew these. I put together this slide. There are multiple ones. This is just on a very simplified version of what happens with iron metabolism in the liver cell alone. Each other cell type has their own pathways. But for me, when I start learning something new and I see the intricacies as a scientist, this doesn't sort of make me certainly I can hold together the idea of evolution and creation together when I see the intricacies of life down to a level that's molecular, you can't see, but you can measure in various ways. And so it just blows me away as I learn new things. The intricacies of life, just something so simple as maintaining iron level in your body has amazing complexity. And so that's part of that. So the benefits, what are listed, and there's some, John Templeton Foundation has looked at the science of awe. There hasn't been a lot of research done on awe, but there's some. And these are the points that were made from looking at, I think they were, I don't remember, 70 studies on awe in various ways. It makes you more humble. We think less about ourselves and more about others. Increases a feeling of connectedness. Again, if not just with other people, but the world, maybe the universe, God, you can define that how you wish. Increases critical thinking when you look at things that you try to understand. Increases positive mood. Certainly decreases materialism, makes us more kind and generous. And, for some people, increases spiritual feeling. I think it's just depending on where you come from to start with. I would attribute much of these experiences to God, but other people that wouldn't, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't also have awe experiences as well. Okay, so that was just my sort of introduction to awe, and I focused almost exclusively on just images of awe, but I know a lot more ways we experience awe. So just like to hear from other people.
John, this is Peggy.
Uh-huh.
I will speak about my experiences. Most of mine are connected to nature, and I like to go out early in the morning, just before daylight, and look at the sky. And the mornings are beginning to cool, and it makes a difference in the atmosphere. But those first rays of sun feel good when the sun rises and hits my face. But I'm usually out much earlier than that. And for a number of days, I was able to see that four-cornered star, our International Space Station. You got to have a really clear morning to see that. And certainly we don't have that now. But then I'm out in the cul-de-sac when I do that, because we have a lot of trees around and you have to find an open space in our neighborhood. And then another time that really is very peaceful and interesting is in the evenings. I like to go to, I live just off of Archer Road, and I will go to any of the parking lots along Archer Road, all of this string of parking lots in the shopping centers, and look at the evening sky then, because the colors are just beautiful, from the kind of midnight color on through the purples and the blues and the turquoise, and then into the peach colors and the rose colors. And then just before the sun is totally down, there's that beautiful gold backlight that just draws like a thin gold band around all of the clouds. And I just find that so beautiful and so calming, for one thing, which is a good thing to have right now. I guess all of us are going through a lot of stress with COVID, but I've got some other stressors too, and having difficulty with several things at once. But those are really great moments for me. I can recall a situation years ago when my husband and I and our daughter were at the beach, and we were sitting in the car, and I noticed this water spout coming up the beach. It was still partially in the water, but it was near the beach. And I hopped out and grabbed my beach chair and walked toward it. And I actually walked into this thing, not knowing what it would be like. And it was probably a stupid thing to do, but it was an amazing experience. And when I got into the center, it was very dry. And I put my chair down and just sat there. And it pretty quickly moved on. But it was just this swirling water. And then it moved down toward the car. Of course, my husband and daughter thought I was absolutely crazy, and it probably was a dangerous thing to do, but it was just an amazing experience, and I think I will never forget that.
All right, thank you, Peggy. Others? I see Jeff there. One of the areas that I think many people experience awe is music. So thoughts?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, there are moments, lots of moments. Awe is something that is so momentary. It's so fleeting, and suddenly it comes and goes, and you're left with the impression. And you showed a lot of the same things that I take so much pleasure in seeing. I was just looking through some of my photographs we took on our trip, and for example, hummingbirds at the feeder when we were in the mountains on our trip up north along the Mississippi, and always insects. I take pictures of tiny little insects, and it's just amazing. That just provokes a lot of awe in me that these little tiny creatures have such complexity inside them. I know a lot about what happens inside an insect, and it's just incredible the types of things that exist there. And you point out larger things. I love to take pictures of the moon. The moon just blows my mind when you can see it up close and live. You see the dimensionality behind all of its all of its features. It's so great to see that. So there's an awful lot in nature that I just get. We I don't know if it rises to that level, but we get a little bit of awe every day out of watching our birds and other creatures in the yard. We look out both our windows and see all kinds of crazy things happening during the day. So you've pointed out an awful lot of the same things that we get lots of pleasure and lots of awe, feeling of awe from.
Yeah, I could add to that. Jeff mentioned our trip north, and we were canoeing up in the Boundary Waters. And we went all the way to the end of the lake that we were on. And here were these swans. And they started doing this dance thing. It was just incredible. I like, we were there then when they were doing that.
That was incredible.
It was really, really something.
And the eagles, there were so many eagles, and they flew right over our heads, and they were spectacular. And one we saw chasing, I saw it chasing a loon into the woods and out of the woods again, and that was pretty amazing. The loon escaped, luckily.
Great. Other people?
Yeah, this is Sanford. I seem to be having feedback.
Could you all mute your mute yourself?
Okay, that's better. I don't know if is my picture showing up on anyone's screen?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to show
Your
what has
face
created.
is.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to show what has created some awe recently, and that is some whistling ducks. I don't know if you can see them. There are two parents, and they had 22 babies, and they started out as tiny little teacup, half a teacup, and now they have yesterday the 22 of them were just outside our lawn, and they're clear ducklings now and almost ready to move out into the world. But just like was noted, the nature being, even though in an apartment complex, cars parked here or there, to be able to see the birds and watch them and watch them eat and watch them catch fish. That was just spectacular. I really appreciated John Harvey's slideshow. That really just opened up so much. And I wanted to recommend this book called Consolation. And it's written by, it's almost poetry by David White. And he has a section on beauty that seems very relevant here, because often what gives us awe, sometimes it might be the terrifying, a lightning storm, but often it is the beauty of things. And in his little write-up, he says, beauty is the harvest of presence, the effervescent moment of seeing or hearing on the outside what already lives far inside us. The eyes, the ear, or the imagination suddenly become a bridge between the here and the there, between the then and now, between the inside and the outside. Beauty is the conversation between what we think is happening outside in the world and what is just about to occur far inside us. I'll skip to the next one. He talks then about beauty is almost always found in symmetries and intriguing asymmetries. The symmetries and asymmetries seen out in creation, the wings of the moth, the airy sky and the solid earth, the restful, focused eyes of a loving face in which we see our own self reflected, the symmetry also of bringing together inner and outer recognitions. And he's a poet, but he's really been kind of my guide and guru, along with Richard Rohr and John Philip Newell, to help me appreciate those moments of very deep awe of this incredible mystery. And I often go back to thinking about that, the Big Bang, from this tiny something, from this nothing, all of a sudden, creation. And here we are, a nit on a gnat, with lifespans that are not that long. And to be able to experience awe is just one of the gifts of life. And I really appreciate the sharing that has happened so far here today.
There were several things that came to mind for me, and some of these are probably because they're first time experiences, but I still remember the first time I flew in a plane and getting that perspective up above the clouds. It was just such an awe-filled moment for me. And then looking down, I mean, it's not quite like being out in outer space and looking down at the earth, but just seeing the earth or the land from way up, is just, I don't know, it was just a phenomenal experience. And then I also remember the first time that we snorkeled over Coral Reef in St. John's. This was back in the 1970s when the coral reefs were still just absolutely stunning. But if you just sit on the beach and look out at the ocean, you have no idea that exists underwater. And then you snorkel over those coral reefs and it's just mind-boggling. It's just so awesome. I just thought that was phenomenal. And one of the other things that just fills me with awe is watching a butterfly emerge from a chrysalis. Oh my gosh, it's just so incredible. And then just to see how different each caterpillar is and how different each butterfly is. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. And then I remember, this comes back to some of the science stuff, but I remember watching this movie or show, something about the biological process of how life is formed, how a baby is formed, and just the whole thing from the moment of fertilization to birth. I mean, it was incredible. It was like some of John's slides about cells, and you just think, all of how intricate is all of that development. It's just mind-boggling. And then the other thing that always just blows my mind is whenever we go to a place like a planetarium or something, and you see these pictures of these different galaxies and all these things that are so far away and so huge, and it's just like, wow, I mean, it's just so amazing. It's just so amazing. So those are some of the things that came to mind for me. or planting a seed. Oh my gosh, planting a seed and then see this plant that comes out of that little tiny seed. It's like, wow.
John, this is Peter Hyatt. I don't know exactly what the word awe means. What I wanted to talk about was two incidents that I would say was the education of Peter Hyatt, because I'm a natural engineer. I sit there and look at a problem and figure it out and so on, and that's where my nature is. And I had two incidents that were absolutely central in getting me out of my head and into just watching the world around me. The first one I wanted to talk about was when I was a kid. My parents used to always have tickets to go to the Portland Symphony Orchestra. And we had to drive for an hour up to Portland to go to the symphony. And I would get dressed in this little stiff a suit that I had when I was a kid. And I would go there and I would listen to this music that I didn't understand at all. And then we would go home. And then one time we went to one of these concerts, and I sat there, and all of a sudden the orchestra started playing Scheherazade. I don't have any idea why this happened to me, but all of a sudden I could see this mysterious Arab, coming out of his palace, and I could see the beautiful Scheherazade going on all in my head, and all of a sudden music meant something very different to me than it had meant up until that time. And for that time, from that moment, was the real moment that I learned to the real meaning and the wonder of music. The other incident I had was much later, when I was in my first job as a highway engineer, and we were working on the proposed highway between Brookings and Gold Beach on the coast of Oregon, and I was part of the survey crew that was going along, and this proposed center line for this highway went right through this was all in the forests like this of the coastal Oregon. And the center line was going to go right through this little scene of a pool that I imagine was, probably an acre and a half or something like this, that the center line of the highway was going to go right through the middle of it. And I sat down on the bank of this, above this pool like this, and the pool was pure green. The water was just as pure as you could go, with no ripples or anything like this, just pure water like this. And there were two waterfalls from little creeks falling into this pond, and with ferns and stuff all around the edge like this. And as far as I knew, I was the first human being in the whole world to ever see this pond. And I just sat down and looked there, at knowing that what I was doing was going to destroy this scene. And for some reason or other, I felt an immediate requirement that I had to sit down and watch this pond. I had to take it in. I had to save this pond somehow in memory of human beings, because it was just beyond description. So on. It was I think the second instance that I can remember where I had to get out of my head. I just had to just sit there and watch, and be aware of the beauty rather than the aware of what was, the mechanics of it or anything like this. And it was learning that there is a part of life that is just simply to experience that part of life, rather than having to figure it out, which is the whole of my life other than that. But those two experiences were absolutely central to to my growth as a real human being.
Well, I could add a little something here, and that's the ability of our body to heal. If I cut my finger in the kitchen, a couple days later, it's all better. Isn't that amazing? Just amazing.
Yeah, there's a real sense of awe that sometimes comes from cataclysm, of course. And I'm thinking of my thoughts, of course, of our ephemerality on Earth, and that, you know, the human race isn't the be all end all of nature. We very well may be gone in within a millennium. It's hard to say, but the thought that of all the species that are being destroyed or that are disappearing, the fact that there will be many more, and the fact that the Earth will continue without us, the fact that the processes of life will continue, and that and extending that to the universe even, it's pretty cerebral, but I get a sense of awe out of thinking about that. That is tremendous to me, that there's something so much bigger in time as well as space.
It's not about us.
Right. Or me, especially.
I just want to do a real brief thing, and then I'll get back here some more things before I forget it. Is Sanford talked about the whistling ducks, and it's interesting that I also had this kind of awe experience with whistling ducks this week. Unfortunately, our backyard is flooded now, and so now we have ducks. But when they take off to go roost, they make a lot of noise. So I'm going to try to play a little thing. I just was so impressed with the sound in this case that I taped it. So I don't know if you can hear this, but. Okay, so that's whistling, I guess. Other thoughts?
Well, you bring up hearing a sound. I often listen to great sounds, sometimes amplified through instruments other than just my ears. But in any case, I can feel awe by, say, feeling the stones on our fireplace, the feeling of these fossils that are embedded in the limestone, and just feeling the textures. So there's so much more to experience rather than just with our eyes. Our eyes are the most obvious to us, I think, but our senses in general.
Yeah. What about smell?
Smell, yeah.
I often smell my when I'm outside. I smell Southeast Missouri in my childhood. I go back. It's I grew up in Western Kansas where there's no water, and I would go to visit my grandparents in Missouri, and it just the smell of, I guess, rotted wood and whatever moisture. And I get that at times here in Gainesville, and when I smell that smell, it's like I'm transposed to a whole different place. I'm back as a child. I'm back in Southeast Missouri. It's just amazing.
Speaking of that, I have bread in the oven, and it's now smelling very nice. And I'm probably going to have to pay attention to it soon, so I might have to leave. But I certainly am with you on that, John, on the smells.
Well, especially bread. Amazing.
As a child, I would walk to school and in Los Angeles, and the raindrops would fall on the concrete, and the smell of the concrete just was amazing to me as a child. And the fact that the same phenomenon could bring that back, you know, maybe many tens of years later, suddenly I'll be transported into that moment. That's pretty awesome to me.
Before I go, I want to make sure I thank John for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. That was just really great and very timely two things I'm thinking of. And one is Einstein once said, whoever does not have a sense of mystery is as good as dead. And that coming from Einstein. And the other thing, when you were talking about the different, I guess the best way I can say it is ways of knowing, realizing that there are different ways of knowing. And that goes beyond, as Peter was saying, our tendency to want to just say, well, rationality is the best way to know. And the more we experience about contemporary life, the more we realize that people from different places, they don't know things the way we know things. And ours, like Jeff was just saying, this is not, or somebody else, this is not just made for us, this whole thing. And neither is knowing made just for rationality. And that, I guess, we all get a little better sense of as you get older. But at any rate, one final little piece of information, and that is that of the magnitude of things that are large, which are the scope of the universe or the farthest reaches of the universe that we can see, and the tiniest things that we can encounter, the average of those two extremes, 10 to the 28th, 10 to the minus 28th, or something like that, if you get down to the quantum level. If you average those, you come out with about 2 meters, which is the size of a human being. So I guess there is one sense in which we can stretch things to say, well, it might be a little bit about us.
I think part of the skill there is that you can even look at such a thing as an equation and see in an equation that there is, this is a way to find an answer to a problem, but it's also an experience. It's saying this equation is doing something, and you have to look at everything, in both ways. There is a skill, I think, that we learn with maturity, and that is to just simply look or just simply experience without having to figure it out or without having to know, but simply to experience it.
Sort of along the same lines, when I studied, for example, the processes in an insect that allow it to fly, I looked at lipoproteins and suddenly, going through these months and months of laboratory experiments, and suddenly something happens, like I injected a hormone into a moth and looked at the lipoproteins in it, and they had suddenly changed incredibly. And to suddenly discover something like that it invoked a sense of awe in me, that I could suddenly understand one little tiny piece of nature so clearly, and there's a sudden revelation like that. So it's so cerebral, and yet it isn't. It's so emotional. It's so it provoked a great deal of awe in me.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's been most awe is watching a child be born, especially my first child. I just remember after my daughter Ashley was born, it was out in California. I was in graduate school, and there was nobody. 7 o'clock at night, there was nobody there to share it with. I just went up and down the empty hallways yelling, amazing, fantastic. It's before cell phones, so I had to go somewhere else to call my parents to tell them about it. And it was just one of those, you're not a father and then you're a father. It was one of the life experiences of awe. Liz talked about just watching the development. I'm looking at the tail end of this, and literally tail end of this, and saying, wow. Other thoughts? I mean, I have to tell you, every time I used to sing in a choir at the Methodist Church, and of course, every Easter the choir would do the Hallelujah chorus and or some other Handel thing with the Hallelujah chorus. And I don't think I've ever sung the Hallelujah chorus without crying. I mean, it's just impossible. And I know UCG does that as well, among the congregation, but it's always something I could just guarantee a sense of awe if I participate singing that.
I have
John.
a music one too. Go ahead. Well, okay, here's another music one I just remembered. When I was in junior high, I was in Glee Club. And I remember in a performance we were singing, what's the Thanksgiving song? I can't remember what it was. But anyway, here we are, all these voices, and we're singing this Thanksgiving song. And I choked up. I couldn't sing anymore. I just got teary. Yeah, that can happen.
Yeah, I go with Connie to visit her daughters up in Charlotte, and we go to a service at the Lutheran church there, and Episcopal church, right? And the pipe organ is so incredible that the resonance of those pipes when she hits all the stops, and it's just like that is an amazingly awesome experience. Just the feeling as well as hearing of that is incredible.
Hello there.
Jerry, I see your hand up there.
Yeah, this is Jerry. And just verifying you can hear me.
Yep.
Oh, I sort of want to echo Fred, and that what Peter said really resonated with me, being another engineer, that it's really neat when something happens that you quit trying to analyze it and just exist with it. That really resonated with me. A second quick observation is it seems like, and this echoes on your very first slide, that we seem to be more open to awe when we're out of our normal routine. I think of, if you ask me to say more about the things when I was felt a sense of awe, it very likely would be when I'm on vacation, or at least certainly out of my normal routine. And just to amplify that, I'll share very, very quickly that I was fortunate enough many years ago to go to what's called a bioluminescent bay in the east of Puerto Rico, actually in Vieques, a little island off of Puerto Rico. And this is many years ago, before things have been quite as degraded as they are now. And what happens is, if there's any disturbance in the water, the bioluminescent organisms glow like a lightning bug that we may have seen when we were kids. And while I was out there, it started to rain very slowly, so that there were you could almost count the drops. But every time a drop hit the water would glow, because those little organisms were being disturbed. And it was an incredibly an inspiring moment, and I'll never forget it. And that's my comments.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Any other thoughts? We're getting near the end, but we got another few more minutes here.
John?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say I came in late because I was at church and have to drive home, but I wanted to thank everybody for sharing their moments, because it brought up a lot of memories for me. In particular, Liz, with snorkeling. The first time I went snorkeling, it was in Hawaii, and I was, trying to talk to my husband and going, look, through the snorkel. And anyway, I was so excited. But, and then just now, the bioluminescence, I grew up, my parents had a boat on Long Island Sound. My father's, it was my grandfather's boat, but it was a large cabin cruiser. And we used to sometimes cruise at night. And the wake of the boat would have that bioluminescence just it was just amazing. Or we would go swimming at night and, it would just be really, really beautiful. So a lot more, more of experiences came up about, some places where I've taken photographs and on all my travels. So I really appreciate you talking about all of this. Thank you.
I wanted to show this. Can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we've covered many of these, but I wanted to put it towards the end here that this was this psychologist looking at awe, and he described this as 8 wonders of life and what happens with awe. And so one is the witness of other people's moral beauty and courage. I certainly get choked up sometimes when in the news when you see someone that stands up, that has moral courage. We can feel this when we move in unison with others, when we dance, when you walk with a friend, when you sing in a choir. We've talked about this, and I don't want to make it sound a Gator game to sound too awe-inspiring, but when my son and I were there yesterday, when it's fourth quarter and we have the song playing, I Won't Back Down, and everybody's got their cell phones lights on, or the whole stadium's lit up with cell phones. It's one where you feel a connection. I've always felt like one thing about sports, all of a sudden black people and white people are high-fiving and celebrating together. And so that's one of those things that working more in unison and sometimes creates a feeling of awe. We talked a lot about nature. We talked about listening to, or I'm very envious of people that can actually create music. I love music, but I can't create it. Taking in a visual art form or film, sometimes watching, you get somebody says, you need to see this YouTube. Maybe it's a small child that sings like a adult or something, and it just so blows you away that it's awe-inspiring to see some visual things. And then seeking out a spiritual or religious experience where you go purposefully go on a retreat, or Andy in Ireland doing his hikes and things where you really try to find, find that. Consider a big idea, and we've talked some about that, just to think about something bigger. And one that's created awe in me recently, I was just realizing I've lived in this house with live oak trees on our property all around for 25 years or something. And I realized how much carbon those trees have in them that came from me, because I'm breathing out CO2 and they're incorporating that carbon into their structure. And so it's like part of me when I walk outside, I am communicating with the trees. And you think bigger, well, everywhere I've ever been, I've left something behind in the trees. And then that whole idea that we're all just created of dust, from the universe. So there's this whole feeling of connection that I think in this, what I call a big idea. And then witnessing life and death. We talked about the birth of a child, and when you've been present when someone dies, what an awe-inspiring, awe-type experience that is. Particularly, I was present with my mother's death, and so it's all these different opportunities we have to find awe, and mostly some of them we can actually easily work towards. Just walk outside and be alert, or listen to, put on the music that we know really means something to us, or do these other things. So I think there's a lot that we can do to try to create awe moments regularly in our lives, rather than just, as much as I love the big ones, there's a lot of small ones out there that we can participate in and enrich our lives. And I'll just show the last couple of pictures. But more awe for me, this is a sunrise over at Swanee, and a sunset where we have a boat ramp there, a lift, and that's just a sunset. So Yeah, there's nothing like sunrises and sunsets to create awe. Let's see how we're doing. I think we got it like any last wrap up. We got like a minute left here. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming and sharing. Again, it's just amazing to me, and it's just wonderful to be able to share with other people. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, John, for doing this.
Honey. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Have a
Thank
nice
you.
day.
This was
See all
wonderful.
of you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was a good thing. That was really nice.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. Yes.
Hi, Mary. Are you coming in for the surface or were you here for the whole thing? That was a wonderful seminar. This is Mary Applin.
Yes.
I think everybody just snapped out, other than us.
Yes. Okay. I'll see if I can figure out how to get out.
All you have to do is look for the little leave button. Usually it's on the right lower corner of most devices, and sometimes it's red and it'll say leave, and all you have to do is click the leave, and that'll take you out of the Zoom session.
Okay. Thank you.
That's really nice seeing you. Speaking of people who create awe with music, I mean, you're right there. You and Art are really wonderful artists.
I couldn't figure out how to share, but I remember being at the Florida Folk Festival and singing Angel Band.
Oh God, I love that song. Oh,
yeah.
Is anybody doing, I know you can't really do Shape Note online, but is anybody doing Zoom Shape Note? Or are you guys getting together for Shape? You can't really because it's grouping.
No, I really miss the Shape.
There will be a day.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, anyway, I'm gonna click out, and again, if you see leave,
Good
I
to
hope to
talk.
see you in person sometime soon. Okay.
All right. Thank
I'm
you.
leaving right now, and if you're on, are you on your phone or your
Gotta
computer?
leave. I thought I had left, but
Okay,
okay.
bye.
Bye. Okay, so evidently I'm still on. So I'll try to figure out how to get back on and then leave.
In the lower right is a leave button.
Well, I thought I pressed it, and it's completely disappeared now. So just a minute, let me see if I can. Okay.